Namaskar. This is Madhur Gupta in Leadership SAMVAD with Sri Ramachandran Parthasarthi, popularly known as Ram, focusing on Optician Act for India. Is it a possible future need or an emergent solution to an impending issue? Taking a global perspective, sir, could you briefly share your experience and expertise in India's optical industry and your perspective on the need for regulatory frameworks?
Yeah, thank you, Madhur, for giving me this opportunity. And it's a very important topic, given that I think it's very interesting that the GST two has been now in force, and this landmark act by the government of India in terms of ensuring that the consumers get the best out of both disposable income available with the consumer space, and it also impacts directly positively to the optical industry. And I think through your channel, I would like to thank the government of India for this fantastic, the effort in bringing down the GST level, which is commendable. So coming to now the why to the question of is Opticians Act necessary? That's the first question. If at all it's necessary, is it the right time? I think we need to look at from the India perspective as well as the global perspective. So what I see, the reason why it could be necessary in India is because of the fact that the optician is a very opticianry, if I may call it, is a very noble profession, and it needs to be recognized as one of the professions to give healthcare product to the consumers in India. So it's a quasi healthcare services. It's neither falls in the full purview of the healthcare, at the same time it doesn't fall under the consumer kind of or out of the shelf product. So there is a lot of value addition which an optician gives. So given that, we need to secure the interest of the opticians, and therefore the Opticians Act could probably play a role for the Indian business houses, fairly fragmented industry where the business houses run the optical stores and can be protected in the longer period of time.
So, what drew you to focus on the regulation of optical professionals in India?
Yeah, it's because, see, why does Opticians Act? Let me give you a perspective of what's around in the global scenario, wherein countries like Australia, you have countries like France, Germany, Singapore, to name a few, have some legislations which are partial region. It could be region specific wise, or it could be legislature across the country, and so on. And the opticians are recognized there by an Opticians Act. For instance, in UK, there's an Opticians Act which recognizes ophthalmic opticians and dispensing optician. So it is very important for us in India as well, and to the optician community, to recognize them through the Opticians Act by regulatory mechanism, and which I think we need to represent to the government to recognize the opticianry as one of the key enablers for giving service to the people who need spectacles. To give you an example, if you look at international standard classification of occupations, ISO code 2267, it actually combines optometrists and ophthalmic opticians together in 2267. Now we have the NCAHP Act, which has come into force, which regulates and standardizes the education and practice of allied healthcare. So optometry as a profession has now been recognized in this act, through this act, and through the ISO code 2267. Now, when you look at ISO code 3254, this is for the dispensing opticians. This sits in it doesn't sit anywhere. It probably the only thing which recognizes an optician in India is under the Shops and Establishment Act. So this probably would require a little bit of a larger discussion with all stakeholders to see if there's a merit in bringing in an Opticians Act, so that we recognize them as licensed professionals who can then give service based on certain quality parameters. So that's to give you, it's a very large subject, but I'm trying to give it in a nutshell about the need for regulating this industry to the benefit of the existing opticians.
Yes. And then, looking at the current regulation landscape, what are the key gaps in the current framework for optical professionals in India, and how do they impact the industry?
See, today, right now, we don't have a kind of a regulation. Anybody can open an optical store. I mean, there's no regulation per se. It's good and bad because the end of it, if you look at why bad is because there's no minimum quality standards set for dispensing of spectacles. Why it needs minimum quality standards is the Prime Minister as well as the government is now focusing on Atmanirbharta, and what it means is also giving good quality products from India. So the quality products does not end by just producing, lenses or frames in India. It also means that the product should go to the end consumer or the wearer in a right fashion. So for which there's a lot of work being given done by the opticians, be it taking PD measurements, suggesting the right frames, and so on. So I think what is required is to recognize this profession, which is actually an important part of the final journey to the consumer, the product, which then goes as spectacle. So I think for that matter, we need to regulate and standardize a bit on the dispensing part of spectacles to the public at large. Having said that, I think we could possibly eliminate, I mean, we could keep out readers out, because readers in many parts of the world is not part of the Opticians Act, because it is basically the out of shelf product. So it's out of counter product. So it's basically removed from it. But having said that, the readers also should have minimum quality parameters, and so that we don't dump. India is not a dumping ground for cheap readers to be imported and dumped into the rural part of India. It should be good quality, reasonably good quality readers, so that everybody can see better. But it should also have some minimum quality standards as far as readers is concerned. For spectacles is concerned, is more kind of a 360 approach, wherein everything is taken care, manufacturing, then the dispensing to the end consumer is taken care, and that's where opticians come into play.
So, how do you see the recent advances in education, especially the NCAHP Act, influencing professional standards in the optical sector?
See, NCAHP Act is primarily, as I had indicated earlier, it is to regulate and standardize the education and practice of allied healthcare. So one of the allied healthcare is, besides physiotherapy and other professions, optometry also comes into this particular NCAHP Act. And it's a good thing what the government has done, and it is recognizing the optometrist as a profession. It is also recognizing ophthalmic assistants as a profession, whereas it is opticians are not in this scope of NCAHP. And that's all the reason that I personally believe that the optician should also be recognized in a fashion that what the services they render is actually through a licensed approach, so that all and sundry cannot open stores, and thereby bringing down the quality of eye care, which is part of the healthcare. Incidentally, as you may be aware, even all the government advertisements for the GST, which has been announced now, spectacles is coming under healthcare. So that's how they have framed it. So having said that, which means we like it or not, spectacles are under healthcare, and that's so all the more reason opticians should be recognized without any tightening of it should not be in such a way that there is it becomes difficult for business to be managed, but at the same time we should at least have minimum quality standards. That's the objective of that.
Basically, you already answered, whether that Optician Act is really necessary to address the challenges in eye care delivery. So, what are the potential risks or consequences of not having a regulatory framework for optical professionals in India?
As I see it, and this is again my personal view, is that there is a mushrooming of stores in India in major cities, which is not in the interest of the I'm not saying that we should tighten up in such a way that there's no competition. That's not my observation here. My comment is more to bring in some minimum practices with healthy competition, so that all this industry can survive and also thrive, because people from outside tend to believe that there's a lot of profits in this optical industry, which is not true. actually the optical retailers are actually not in a, there's a lot of cost which is goes into it. And for that, and also because they need to have qualified optometrists to be in the store and so on. And the rentals have gone up in India. So having said that, we need to make sure that the quality parameters are not compromised just in order to make profits. And that's the reason the minimum standards come into play. And it's all the more evident now. And it is going to help the existing opticians because there can always be a grandfather clause to make sure that the existing opticians are protected. And also have some minimum standards, which I think people like you can take up the responsibility of, starting up some programs and so on to bring certain levels of competency in areas where there is a little bit of a weakness. And so this can be easily addressed over a 5-year period in India, and we'll be in line with the global aspects, global standards as well.
So, considering that you've already specified that there are a few countries which have this Opticians Act, and there are learnings from them, we can look for the global best practices or models. What do you think India should consider when developing its own regulatory framework?
This is a very good question, Madhur, because I think we should not just ape what is there in the West or some of the developed countries. We need to look at it from the Indian perspective, and that's where people were. India has to be broken down into two parts. One is areas where we are still not being able to access healthcare, especially eye care. And for that, the model has to be different, which the NGOs can play a large role, and they are the competent people to understand how to reach out without compromising on quality. So, in this aspect, I think WHO specs have come up with specs 2030, which basically S stands for improved access to refractive services, and also to build capacity services and also education and so on, and also strengthen surveillance and research. So what we need to look at it that the objectives of specs 2030 is to increase the effective coverage currently at 40% to 70% by the year 2030. And they have also come up with guidelines on minimum quality standards for spectacles. They have released it in 2025, very recently, in a month or two back. Given that we already have some baselines which are already set, we need to figure out, and this means it's a great opportunity for opticians in India, because we look at the population. So 1.4 billion, aged over 40, and it's about 476 billion people are aged above 40. So there's a big need for uncorrected refractive error, big need to address presbyopia. So, and WHO has already put spectacles under WHO priority assistive products list, which includes spectacles. So, given all this in scenario, we need to figure out what is the right model for the opticianry community, because opticians play a large role, and many a time it is not. It's either, I wouldn't say it's ignored, it's taken for granted in terms of their existence in this whole scenario. So we need to figure out how we can blend optometrists, opticians, so that the end deliverable to the consumers, it goes seamlessly with good quality. I think that's the reason all the more necessary for corrective spectacles to be brought in into this framework. Leaving aside the readers, which to me is more a quality of the product itself rather than the technical services which are needed to dispense a
If I have
reader.
heard this correctly, there are certain regular frameworks by WHO for spectacle dispensing been issued, and this could possibly be implemented here in India in the future.
Yes, because they have given the guidelines, and it's a summary guide for quality standards for spectacles to be used across by all segments of the population, be it opticians and of course the NGOs who reach the rural part of the market and so on. So I think it's a very important landmark so far as guide to quality standards of spectacles are concerned. And it's a standard document, it's a global document for frames, lenses, and I think, and also for the readers. So I think it's a very important document for all of us to take note of, and so that we build this industry in a much more structured manner, keeping quality in mind. And it's in sync with what our government is talking about, and make in India, but having quality products from India. I think everything is falling in line actually.
While implementing, as you rightly said, there is some kind of a structure that can be accessed. And then, are there any potential challenges that you foresee?
Yes, to take everybody into common ground. It's not going to be easy, because there could be, yeah, to be fair, there can be always an element of nervousness with our folks around in the industry. I think we need to bring them into a minimum understanding of why this would help them, take their views as well, and integrate that into a kind of a draft, so that we can recommend to the government. It's a big task in hand. It's not, we don't have to rush it. At the same time, we need to be prepared, because this could also save a lot of this prescription going online. See, we need digital, we need innovation, we need tech. Nobody is denying that. We need everything. But at the same time, for progressives, for instance, I'm taking an example of progressives, you need proper measurements and proper fittings. And patient or a wearer has to be, its ideal thing is to see him physical, so that we can adjust part of it, the frames or the lenses at the time of dispensing. So that's where the opticians play a large role in that. And to me personally, progressive dispensing can never go fully online. It will remain with the optician community. And as I mentioned earlier, the presbyopia is growing, so there's a huge opportunity. And if you're able to regulate this industry with good quality and services, I think it's a win-win for everyone. There'll be a good business for opticians to be in this over a period of decades. Because the market is big in India, and I don't think there's any challenge. And for opticianry also, they'll be recognized as a profession, and I think they deserve that recognition today, which is just recognized under shops and establishment. I'm not undermining the shops and establishment as such, but I'm only saying that we need to be recognized more.
So, as per what I have understood, it's more like the Optician Act is going to transform the quality, safety, uh, of dispensing, and obviously it will enhance career opportunities in the optical sector. What's your take on this?
No, absolutely. I think you got it right. It's going to be a blend of all this. Will help and facilitate this industry to move forward. It will also be ready to face competition, both external and internal. As you will see that more as the industry is growing, you will see more new entrants coming in. So the independent opticians also will be prepared to face the new challenges, be it competition or be it even understanding newer technology and so on. So I think this requires a bit of thinking. And if you look at it, many of the Indian opticians today would qualify themselves as dispensing opticians for sure. And quite a large chunk of them in the cities would also be qualifying themselves as ophthalmic opticians. So I think, given the nature, we already are doing this. Why not we do something by which we are able to streamline, so that just doesn't become one more kind of mom and pop stores coming out, and at the cost of quality. That's the limited take of my thoughts about Opticians Act in India, and the proposed, and why the need for Opticians Act in India.
Do you foresee career opportunities also to grow in the Indian optical sector? So, what's your take on that?
Oh, yes, most definitely, because not only within India, it can also go outside the scope, outside India as well. If somebody wants to go abroad and set up either as business, set up stores, it becomes much simpler, because you'll have some commonality of the regulatory frameworks which could help them. Or within India, if they either be an entrepreneur, be an employee, I think this whole thing will take a newer dimension. Regulation doesn't mean that we're going to make it life difficult. I'm not saying that it's going to be under drug controller, or it's. I'm not referring to that. It's going to make it more standardization of the dispensing optics, which is going to help the end consumer. That's the whole purpose of this Opticians Act, and the way we can frame it is in such a way that the existing opticians are also safeguarded and taken care.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for your time and making yourself available for this important discussion today. And we are very sure that, Optician India, as usual, will act on your advice, and we will probably start with the actionable points as you have rightly suggested. Besides that, we would also, request the industry leaders, especially people who have been driving the optical industry ever since, to take heed and start, with the Optician Act drafting as soon as possible.
Thank you, Madhur. It's a pleasure always having a chat with you. Thank you.
Pleasure.